Good afternoon, everyone. 2 weeks ago, I was actually speaking at the Zhao Bao Investment Forum, and there was one other speaker who is an econs professor who made a very interesting prediction about the ringgit. Do you want to know what he said about the ringgit? He says that, okay, he's 57 years old this year, and he predicted that when he retires at the age of 62, that's in 5 years' time, he thinks that the exchange rate of ringgit to Sing dollar is going to reach 3:1. Yeah. Do you know what it means to average Singaporeans, especially those who are looking to retire in Iskandar, and also for businessmen who wants to do business, who wants to set up part of their business in Iskandar? That means it's going to translate to at least 15% in cost saving, because the ringgit is going to depreciate by some 15%. Okay, to make it more clear, it just means if a bowl of noodle costs $3 Sing dollar today in Johor, in 5 years' time, the same bowl of noodle is only going to cost $2.50. So, yeah, that's very good news for all the businessmen out there and the retirees out there. So today, of course, from the Forex perspective, there's a very interesting and exciting story about Iskandar, but Forex alone is definitely not the key for the success of Iskandar. So what it is, that's the topic I'm going to address today. So here's the outline. I'm going to talk about the key features of Iskandar and Singapore economy, and there are potential synergies between Singapore and Iskandar. Also, I'm going to touch on the impact of property prices because of this collaboration. And of course, lastly, the risks and concerns about the integration. Okay, the overview of Iskandar, Malaysia, in terms of size, it's about 3 times the size of Singapore and 2 times the size of Hong Kong. It's created in 2006 under the Iskandar Regional Development Authority, and the GDP growth is less significant but more stable. The manufacturing sector is less competitive. Service sector has yet to establish the critical mass. But for the Malaysia government, actually Iskandar will be a showcase of its current economic transformation process. This is because Malaysia has not really regained its rigor after the Asia financial crisis, and a good part of the deceleration in growth is actually reflected in the foreign direct investment. So before the Asian financial crisis, it was about more than 40%, but recently it only stood at 22% as of last year. That is also why the Iskandar government likes to talk about the cumulative investment figures. And you can see from the chart, the top chart, it tells you currently Iskandar has a total cumulative investment of RM 129 billion, and 44% of the investment have been realized to date. If you look at the growth, it's quite a stellar growth from 2007 to 2012. That's a 33% annualized growth rate. And it's also on its way to meet the 2015 investment target. If you refer to the chart on the right below. And the total investment target for 2025 is expected to be RM 382 billion. In terms of the breakdown of the cumulative investment, it's interesting to see that amongst the promoted sectors, manufacturing is leading with 35.3% of the total investment. But all the other sectors are pretty much at its infancy stage, especially healthcare, education. You can see the percentage of the investment is less than 2%. One interesting point to note is that the supporting sector, if you look at the chart below, the supporting sector, the property development, has already surpassed the manufacturing sector in terms of the total investment, stood at 38.1%. So this could be a warning sign because the sector has grown too fast and too quickly. But the good thing is the locals are increasingly buy into Iskandar. So you can see from the chart on the top chart, you can see the orange part is growing faster than the gray part. The orange part represents the buying from the local investors. And amongst foreign investors, you can see that Singapore tops the foreign investors chart with a total of 6 billion investment so far. In terms of the Johor housing prices, I think the first speaker, Mr. Donald Han, has touched on a little bit. Maybe I just recap. In terms of the performance, Iskandar actually, or Johor rather, it actually underperformed the rest of the Malaysia. Iskandar is represented by the orange line. That's the bottom line. Actually, according to the radar, which is the equivalent of radars in Singapore, the data shows the real estate prices in JB over the last 20 years has merely moved up about 0.6%. It was only until the end of global financial crisis that the market has moved up about 26%. So this translates to an annualized growth rate of 5.5%. And one interesting point to note is that the buyer's profile for Iskandar is quite different from the rest of the Malaysia. If you look at KL, the proportion of foreign buyers is about 20%, that means 1 in 5. But in Iskandar, it's about 39%. That's double the number. And if you look at the Johor housing mix and supply, there are more landed homes going to be built within the next 4 years. You can see from the top chart, the orange part, even though it's quite little, the current stock, is going to increase by 145% by 2017. And the total housing stock by 2017 will increase by 38%. So comparing non-landed and landed, there will be a lot more condo units coming up in Iskandar. Now let's look at Singapore. I think we do not need further introduction of the country. Basically, it's a very mature economy with new growth engines such as high-value manufacturing and new financial services. And in terms of our real GDP, it's also 10 times the size of Iskandar. And for the GDP, we can see that as Singapore matures as a mature economy, the high GDP growth in the range of 5 to 10% in the early part of 2000 is not going to come back again. But Singapore is still expected to outperform the advanced economies. Singapore is also more service-oriented economy right now compared to 10 years ago. The chart on the right shows you that our service has increased from 35% in 2001 to 43% in 2011, whilst manufacturing has shrunk from 37% to 20%. But we also seem to have reached some limits because, firstly, our regional hub status might be under pressure from the Pearl River Delta. In fact, I just came back from Hong Kong yesterday, and I was there when they announced the budget. The government in Hong Kong seems to be very ambitious on the infrastructural projects to keep Hong Kong competitive. They're going to improve the connectivity between Hong Kong and the mainland. And for 2014 alone, they have budgeted 78 billion Hong Kong dollar. That's equivalent to 13 billion Sing dollar. So there will be a high-speed rail from Guangzhou to Shenzhen to Hong Kong. And there will also be an expressway, express bridge from Hong Kong to Zhuhai to Macau. And these improvements will definitely help to weave the region into a single economic cluster, which is about 3 times the size of Hong Kong now. So Singapore, in terms of the manufacturing strategy, it also seems to have reached some limits. For example, there are challenges to our manufacturing competitiveness, like the global MNCs. They are more inclined to choose a location that's closer to a major consumer market rather than based on cost or tax efficiency. And Singapore, the fact that Singapore is getting more expensive and it's not easy to get manpower, it's also posing concerns for these MNCs. So what are the potential synergies between Singapore and Malaysia, Iskandar, Malaysia? So in order to boost our competitiveness, we see several channels through which synergies could be realized. If there were greater economic operations between Singapore and Iskandar, first is the relocation of resources, such as land and labor, to higher value users. That will create higher economic output. And the size of the combined Singapore and Iskandar could be much more bigger and allowing more scope for businesses and consumers to take advantage of the economy of scale. And then we can also leverage on each other's competitive edge. This could complement rather than compete. And finally, with the increased competition, there will be dynamic benefits arising from this. First, if we look at the resource allocation, these are the main constraints that we have right now. Singapore, in terms of land, we have already reached the limits of land reclamation. Over the past 40 years, we have reclaimed about 30 square kilometers. But in Iskandar, right now only about 55% are under development. So there's considerable land for economic development purposes. And in terms of labor, Singapore is also getting more expensive. The fact that we are also tightening the foreign worker inflows will make the wage pressure more acute to businesses. And our current population of 5.4% in future is going to increase to probably 6.9%, but it's still considerably small in terms of the numbers. But in Iskandar, you can see that they have low population density. That means there will be enough room to accommodate people who work in Iskandar. And there's also very liberal immigration policies, unlike Singapore. This is a table to compare the wages of different professions in Singapore and Iskandar. You can see for the manager, in Singapore, the median wage is about $6,400, but in Malaysia, it's only about 1,006 Sing dollar. So the difference is about 75%. Even for the elementary workers, the difference is also quite big at 64%. And the fact that Malaysia ringgit is depreciating will actually help the businesses, because If they hire a worker in Malaysia and the worker comes into your office and asks you for a 10% increment in the salary, you can just nod your head because in 5 years' time, your value of your Sing dollar will actually go up by 15%. So what is 10%, right? And also because of the limited land resources, we also have some problems back home that have already emerged. One of them is the aging population, and it is estimated that by 2030 there will be 900,000 elderly persons aged 65 and above. That's tripling the current figure. And this is equivalent to 20% of the population. So this is our aging population profile. You can see that we are facing this declining old age support ratio and an increasing medium age. Currently, we have about 6 citizens to support 1 senior citizen, but it will reduce to 2.1 citizens to support each senior citizen in 2030. So with the present situation, do you still think we can, by the time we retire, we can achieve this? That means tomorrow you think that, you know, I want to retire, I can just do it. Or this. Okay, the comment reads, I have to make some adjustments, so your new retirement date is 2065. And I hope no one reaches this stage. The worker says, our model worker, he worked till his last breath. So even if you want to retire, or we are finally able to retire, is this where you want to retire? Or this? I'm sure most people will choose this, right? This is actually taken in Iskandar. Okay, of course we can't expect the government to provide for every single retiree, especially the middle, upper, or middle income group, because many such retirees are still going to be very healthy and active in their silver years, but the nursing homes being too institutionalized might not suit their needs. And also a government-subsidized studio apartment in a HDB neighborhood might not appeal to them either. So that's why we think that Iskandar is well-positioned as a hinterland for Singapore's aging population. So this chart shows you where are the healthcare services and amenities that are coming up in Iskandar. This is very essential for the elderly because they want to be close, when they are choosing a location for retirement, they want to be close to healthcare services and amenities. So not to worry, because there are quite a number of pilot projects in this region catered to the needs of the senior citizens. And in Flagship A, we have Thomson Specialist Hospital by billionaire Peter Lim. That is at Johor City Center. And in Flagship B, we also have the Glen Eagle Medini, as well as the Wellness Project by Temasek Holdings. And in Flagship D, that's the Regency Specialist Hospital. And Regency is the first private hospital in JB to be approved under MOH to use MediSafe overseas for approved hospitalization and day surgery. So in future, if all these facilities are ready and our government is willing to further open up the MediSafe, I think Iskandar is poised for very good growth in this region, in this area. And it seems that not only our silver generation need cheaper land to retire, higher educational institutions also need more room and larger market to grow. There is the constraint of land when it comes to attracting more tertiary education institutions to the Republic. This newspaper article, or this Bloomberg article, stated that the University of Chicago is relocating its MBA program to Hong Kong because it wants to be closer to China. And the same article also said that NYU School of Arts and the University of Nevada have plans to close their Singapore campus in the next 2 years. And you can see that the main reason cited was property price remained the biggest problem for foreign universities. So when we have more skill and more diversity, a larger land population and a market, we can do a lot more. There will be more economies of scale, and this could attract manufacturers or service providers who desire a home market of a certain minimum size. The chart shows you the successful metropolises of the global scales. If you look at the population number and the land size, you will notice that Singapore alone is way too small to make it big. And if you add Iskandar and Singapore, we are just about the right size in terms of population. And land size is also ideal. So if we have this integration, the lower paid workers can have the option to live in Iskandar and commute to work to Singapore on a daily basis. And also, both Singapore and Malaysia has unique strengths. For example, Iskandar has an environment that is more supportive of their entrepreneurship than Singapore. So if they could connect more seamlessly, the two regions can reap more benefits, definitely. In Singapore, we have better corporate governance, and it's easier to do business. And for the increased competition, competition might not be a bad thing for Singapore. In fact, it could complement each other and bring about more benefits in sub-areas. I have outlined 3 sectors here. They are the manufacturing sector, education, and tourism. So when it comes to tertiary, it comes to, say, manufacturing, many can choose to operate on both sides of the causeway, so as to be close to Singapore with lower costs. And this could also ease some rising cost pressure and some of the infrastructure pressure. But the firm can continue to use Singapore-based financial and transport and logistics services. In the case of tertiary institutions, as mentioned earlier in the Bloomberg article, we need more of them to develop innovation and intellectual capital, but locating some of these to IM, Iskandar, Malaysia, could also ease the immigration and transportation issues. And for tourism, currently, Singapore is still facing inadequate attractions. Higher costs could lead to declining tourist stay. And if the two can combine into one with things like better airport connectivity, we are able to offer tourists wider choice of attractions and accommodations. When we talk about cross-border collaboration, the closest comparison we can think about is probably Shenzhen-Hong Kong model. So I'm going to use a case study to illustrate how it can happen and what's the impact, especially on property prices. So this top chart is showing you the population growth. You can see that the orange part is the migrant workers, and the black part is the residents. So you can see Shenzhen's GDP, the chart below is Shenzhen's GDP. It grew at an annualized rate of 25%, far surpassing the national average of 9.9 between 1980 to 2012. And real estate prices have also increased by 14-fold since 1988. It seems that it's going to be a win-win situation for home prices because with seamless connectivity between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, an estimated about 500,000 people cross the border via land daily. It seems that there's no adverse impact because both markets continue to appreciate, but the gap narrows, especially near the borders. So what are the necessary ingredients for success? We think that we need 4 ingredients. They are seamless connectivity for people and goods, good bilateral ties, improvement of law and order, and job creation. For the seamless connectivity, I think both countries have already made some improvement in terms of building high-speed railway and the Singapore-Johor Rail Transit System, the RTS. And there will be some sea connectivity, for example, the new CIQ facility at Putri Harbour. And there is also a proposed third causeway to ease substantial congestion and delay. If you talk about typically the presence of high-speed railway is quite commonly associated with the formation of a mega region. It brings growth in population, employment, business environment, real estate values, as well as determines the growth trend and area. So this chart, this map shows you where all the high-speed rail links are. And of course, we need good bilateral ties so as to ensure that both parties continue to put in effort to make Iskandar successful. Of course, we also need the improvement of law and order because crime is still a key concern for many Singaporeans. Even though the crime rate, according to the Malaysian authority, the crime rate has fallen by 47% in 2011. But some of the high-profile or well-reported cases continue to alarm Singaporeans. And also the perception of this prevalent petty corruption, for example, government officials requiring incentive payments for services done also needs to be corrected. And the last ingredient is the job creation. We noticed that so far in Iskandar, there has been a creation of 584,000 jobs with 15% for skilled labor. And the target is 1.4 million job vacancies by 2025. So some of the upcoming catalyst projects like Moto Sports City, Urban Resort Wellness Project should be able to boost job creation. But definitely things are not as rosy as it seems because there are also risks and concerns about whether this mega region can really take off smoothly because most of the successful mega regions around the world are in the same country. But Singapore and Malaysia are still two different sovereign countries with different political and economic policies. And we just highlighted earlier that the housing supply, the incoming supply, in Johor, if you look at the diagrams, the first one is Iskandar, the very huge bar, as compared to Kuala Lumpur, which is the middle one, and Penang is the last one. So you can see that we do have a huge supply of 267,000 units, residential units, coming to Iskandar alone. And of course, not forgetting the policy risks, like the latest property cooling measures they have just announced. And also, there's some doubts raised whether the Malaysian government is able to continue to invest in costly infrastructure because according to the current Malaysia's debt to GDP ratio, they have already busted their previous debt ceiling of 50%. And one main reason is that the money has been used for infrastructural development. So could they continue to commit billions of dollars on infrastructural development? I guess it is for our officials to find out. So in conclusion, the key takeaways, Singapore on its own lacks land and labor to become a global city on the scale of London and New York. And Iskandar, Malaysia would not be the strong, sustainable global and metropolis without close cooperations with Singapore. So neither side can achieve its long-term goal without the other. But there are obstacles. So question really remains whether both governments will see their differences in politics and economic policies over the next decade to enhance these bilateral economic interactions. And we do expect volatility in the housing market between 2015 to 2020. But if it does succeed in delivering the result, it could further boost Singapore's competitiveness regionally and globally. And it will be a win-win situation for the real estate market in both Singapore and Iskandar. So this could really be the beginning of a new growth era. So with this, I thank you for your attention.